Okay, good morning. Welcome to the March Policy Committee meeting. I want to apologize in advance for anyone waiting live for this meeting and for everyone here waiting for this meeting this morning. It's been an interesting events this morning, so we apologize for starting late. I would like to call the policy meeting to order. And we will start with the approval of the agenda.
Well, we don't have a quorum.
So we can't even call it to order?
You can call it to order, but you have to announce that we don't have a quorum.
Okay. So we have two board members that were unable to make it this morning for business and personal. So we do not have a quorum, but our intent is to go ahead and discuss the policies for second review and policies for first review and administrative guidelines for review, because our goal is to go ahead and send this to the full board at the April meeting on Tuesday. But because it will not officially be able to come out of policy, if we do want to approve these next Tuesday, it will require the board to do their due diligence and provide a second. So we will go ahead and move forward with the, well, we can't do approval of.
Well, we might as well just go through if we have any comments on anything, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Is that what you'd like to do?
We'll table the minutes till next meeting.
You want to table those?
Yeah, because
Okay.
you can't approve.
Because we can't approve them.
Well, I
I don't
didn't
have
know
any
if
comments, though.
Well, we
Okay.
can't approve anything is what
Right.
I was saying.
Yeah.
So if we wanted to send those, but okay, we'll table those.
Yeah, I don't know if the board actually approves those.
Yeah,
generally.
No,
They just go on FYI.
yeah. But I have no comments to the minutes.
Okay.
I didn't have any either.
Okay, cool. Okay, so-
But we don't have a quorum, so we will just save those for the April committee meeting.
Awesome.
Okay. So we will discuss policies for second review, and I will just open it up. We'll begin with policy 4-4, age requirements for attendance.
And I haven't received any comments from any stakeholders on actually on any of these since they went to the board for first review.
I don't have any comments to A through G.
No.
Unless you do.
I do not.
Okay.
I do not have any comments.
So we'll have to make a motion for second read for approval, right? At the
Correct. And unlike
second.
what we normally do, these will not go on the consent agenda. They'll have
Okay.
kind of like we used to do and have it as a separate agenda for policies for approval.
Yep, that sounds good. Okay, so if there's no comments or questions about policy 4-4, we will go on to 4-5.
I have none A through G at all. Do you? I have no comments to the second review.
Let's see. Seems like I apparently did have some comments about 4-14. If everyone can just move to student records. And it seems like, let's see, where did my, if you go to page 3, let's see. This talks about discipline records, and it does define long-term suspension and expulsion records.
Correct.
And part of the student's official record and must be maintained and reviewed according to state law. These discipline records must be expunged and forwarded. And I'm not sure if this is the right place, but I did have a question. It may be further down because this is a big one.
Yeah.
What happens at terminal grade? Because, in my experiences, just being in Union County Public Schools so long, like when a student leaves 5th grade and goes to 6th grade, does that student record get cleared and they start over with the clean record, or like what is this addressing, and is this the same thing?
For discipline records, the state law only requires that long-term suspensions and expulsions be maintained as part of the permanent record. So as part of the permanent record required to retain, the fact that there's long-term suspension and the reason for it. Short-term suspensions, those up to 10 days, up to and including 10 days, or in high school up to and including 6 days, we generally do not maintain past the terminal grade. Now, the only time we would is if it is related to a child's disability and that's record of kind of behavior that's related to disability or why they're being served. But otherwise, the discipline records are they're not maintained past that time.
So when a student gets promoted to middle or promoted to high school, other than long-term and expulsions, all the other minor offenses or whatever gets kind of wiped clean.
They don't hold them against them. Now, from a technical standpoint, strictly technically, it's still in Power School and Educator Handbook, but it's not part of their folder. It's not part of what we would disclose, those kinds of things.
But if the principal at the middle school wanted to look back at the elementary school record, they could.
Yeah. We try and give kids fresh starts, but that's...
So number 3.
Yep.
I just wanted to have a better understanding for records of students with disabilities. It says a list of approved personnel have access to students with, I just wanted to understand who has approval, like what type of positions have access or approval to these files?
It would depend on the need. It might be, for example, if a program specialist needed to go assist the school on the service of a child, they would be able to go down, but you have to sign in that you reviewed that file. If I needed it or Katie needed for us to respond to a subpoena, they would put our name in the record as having had access to it.
But then there's not an actual list of approved personnel.
There's not that, there is a kind of a pokey keeps who can, like this program specialist is assigned to this school, so they have access. And it's broad because it'll say cabinet staff as needed. It'll say program specialist as needed. Doesn't do titles and names specifically, but
So the data manager has that at each school.
So, okay, that was going to be my next question. So the principal doesn't hold these,
No.
the data manager?
It would probably be the case manager for the EC child. It would probably be in the EC, whoever is the department chair.
So that is not in the actual building where the student is going to school?
No, it would be. It would be with the case manager.
Okay,
at the school.
at the individual school.
Yeah, and it's generally each student. It's really not. There's an approved people who can look at files, and then what this is also referring to is that in the actual file, there's a list of people who have received it, who have reviewed it.
So if someone looks in a student's file,
EC file, yep,
that has a disability,
yep.
First off, they have to have approval to even look in the file.
Correct.
And then they have to sign and date when they accessed and went through the file.
Correct.
Do they have to have the parents' permission to look at the file?
No, because this is only school officials who have a reason to know.
Okay.
And that's an exception to FERPA, was when
Okay.
School employees, school officials with a reason to know.
So let's say, I just want to
Sure.
throw this out there for clarification. So let's say you have a third grader with a disability. Would that third grader's teacher be able to have approval to look in that file?
They're required to have access to
Okay.
that file.
Would another member on the third grade team be able to look in that file? Or
Not-
a fourth grade teacher or a fifth grade teacher?
Not unless they were somehow serving that child.
Okay. Would a tutor be able to access that file?
A tutor would probably be able to look at the IEP
And know
what accommodations they would need to be implementing. Would not have access to the psychological, all those other things.
But a team member who does not work with that child would not be able to access
No.
that child's record?
No.
Okay. Thank you very much. And then number 8, juvenile records. I had a question. I did want to ask if if everyone agrees or disagrees, it doesn't matter to me if sheriff and board should be capitalized.
Yes, it should be.
Board
Sorry.
should always be.
Yeah.
I think sheriff and board is mentioned several times if we just
I'll
want to make
fix it.
that
Yep.
minor correction. And,
I usually catch those. I apologize.
oh no, that's fine. I did have a question about, I guess, could you go into further detail on when these are destroyed?
Yeah, and this comes straight out of state law. And I don't know if Jared, I don't want to, just let me know if you want to jump in. When the child leaves the building, the felony notifications are supposed to be destroyed and they're not supposed to make copies of them. And we did revise it some that if it's a transfer kind of within our district, that we would move them along. But it's strictly a state law requirement.
And is it destroyed by the principal or by who?
Principal is the only one who holds the copy.
Correct.
Of it, right?
Schools have done it a couple ways. Sometimes they destroy them themselves. Sometimes they send them back to juvenile services. They work with Angie Horn at juvenile services.
Okay.
And you have to push the button.
Yes, ma'am. I don't really have any additional input other than we're supposed to destroy any paperwork that we get related to a juvenile. Usually the principals will call us and alert us, but they usually take it and destroy anything they get from juvenile services. So
the question that I had last month when this came up is that the principal can't make a copy of any document under any circumstances, but he can share them with individuals, because my concern is we've had an issue in the past with central office being made aware of juvenile petitions at the school level, but not knowing them at the central office level. So it says that the principal may share the records with individuals which includes central office staff. How do they share those records if they're not allowed to make copies of them? Do you guys have to go to the school, or do they let you know by email that they got a petition and it's in their office? Okay.
yes.
By phone or by email.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how they've been
They
notifying
just
me.
can't copy the actual petition.
That is
Okay.
correct. Yes, ma'am. But
That
they
was
are,
my concern.
the principals
They're
are alerting me and Michelle.
Perfect.
Then we'll have discussions about what the offense was and what the appropriate
Great.
placement.
Okay.
So we have 53 schools. Do we want to identify who's responsible for destroying these so that there's no gray area? I mean, should we?
Well, it says the principal or the designee shall destroy.
Okay.
Do you want it to be somebody at central office, so there's a more,
How do you?
that there's a
Does
system
that
of
work?
doing it?
Yeah. Does that work well? I mean, do you know like when these events happen, beyond a shadow of a doubt, 1,000% that these were destroyed?
I think it's good to address it. I'm comfortable with it saying the principal destroys the document. I'm not sure it's feasible sometimes for them to send them all to Michelle or I.
Right.
I think the principals could be.
Okay.
And that's something that you talk to them once a year about destruction of documents and things like that.
And that nothing gets filed away in a cabinet or locked away in a file somewhere.
Correct.
It's truly destroyed.
Yes, ma'am.
And I assume that's through a shredder or something.
Yes.
Okay.
Or like she said, sometimes they send it back to the court, which
Mhm.
I think is the best way to do it. Here it is.
I agree.
This no longer applies.
And get it
here's
out of
your
our
thing back.
hands.
But the court
Yeah.
probably doesn't like that.
They're normally coming through fax to us
Oh,
from
they are?
juvenile
Okay.
services. They
Okay.
usually come from Miss Horn is who we deal with a lot of times, Angie Horn, but they should be destroyed at the school level.
Okay.
And then we just need to have that conversation.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, number 9, other student records. So as a Union County Public Schools parent, I was intrigued by this one, and I was just wondering how many student records, exist in our school system for each student.
It's generally the cumulative folder, a discipline folder, the stuff the Power School maintains with grades and attendance and all of that. If the child is EC or has a 504 plan, we have those folders. There are also things, sole possession records, and that would be a teacher is in a meeting and takes notes for herself about a student and doesn't put them in the student folder, but keeps them for herself or himself to remind them of the needs. Law enforcement, things that Jared and the SRO may work on together. Employment doesn't happen very often, but sometimes we have student interns, those kinds of things. And so there may be an HR record as well, or a volunteer record. Those are the major ones, which is why we included those. There is an exception to FERPA, which is that sole possession. It's if I create it for myself and don't share it with anybody, it's just to help refresh me, or maybe I share it with my sub, then those things are not part of the official student record.
So I think the teacher record is what was the biggest concern for me. Because I know students may work well with one teacher and may not work well with another teacher. They may have a great third grade experience and maybe not a great fourth grade experience.
Right.
What happens to a teacher's record on a child at the end of that grade? Do they pass it along to the fourth grade teacher, pass it along to the fifth grade teacher, or what are the teachers required to do at the end of a school year?
If the record is something that's required to be part of the student's cumulative folder, they're required to put it in there. If it's just kind of their personal notes, they typically destroy those. They
can't pass it along.
They could if they wanted to, absolutely.
To kind of,
give them a heads up to the next teacher or strategies.
And I'm just curious if that's a good thing, if that's good for the student or bad for the student.
I guess it depends on the teacher and the relationship.
So there's multiple files potentially on every student. Yeah, that's a lot of files.
Absolutely. There potentially could be files in 5 or 6 different locations.
Would we ever be in a position, I mean, because we do like for students to have a clean slate. Would we ever want for teachers, like their personal notes or, little things that have happened throughout the school year? I mean, because children mature also. Would we ever want to say that teachers have to destroy their notes at the end of the year, or so that they can have a clean slate the next school year?
I mean, we could, I don't know that Brad's not here to help me. I don't know that any of them move along in general. I mean, we can certainly tell them to do that. I think it's going to depend on, should it be something that goes into another file? Is it something I'd hate to also have if it was and I have all these great strategies and all these great things that I want to.
That works for that student.
Yeah.
You would think they would pass that on to the next teacher.
Yeah.
Okay. The last question I had is on page 12.
Okay.
I just wanted to clarify destruction of records. Is this for after graduation or specifically, I was curious what happens to student records after they graduate from Union County Public Schools?
Yes. There's a records retention schedule that the state puts out. And so this is generally long after the student graduates. When student graduates, they're held at the school level for a year is what our procedure is. And then after a year, they send them to central office. The cumulative folders go to be digitally scanned, and then they're stored. I've not yet been. They keep asking me when can we destroy these old records, and I'm a little kind of like it there in case something happens to this database of.
So the high schools hold on to them for a year.
Yep.
And then after a year, it goes to central office to be scanned and digitally recorded, and I guess those are shredded after they're.
No, we keep the files because I've not been willing to let them throw them out.
Okay, so we store this stuff. Is there a state statute on how many years you have to hold on to these records?
Yeah, there's the Cultural Resources Division. I'm always confused by that. They have this records retention disposal schedule that's in here, and they have a process. I just am. I'm concerned that if we destroy them and can't access them, then what happens if something happens and the digitized version crashes and we lose them? And I'd hate for somebody 20 years down the road to need a transcript for a job and their record has been lost digitally. And because mistakes happen. So we keep them right now, and they give me a lot of, can't we get rid of these?
Well, it's interesting because some postgraduate studies require your high school record. In Ohio, the bar required it all. And I didn't go to law school right after college, so it was 15 years later asking for my high school transcripts.
Yeah.
Where's our warehouse for this?
It's in the same warehouse that we have
That
everything
one,
else.
yeah.
When we left Fairview.
I'm taking up a little bit of storage space. I apologize, but I'm just
No,
not.
I
Because we
agree
have
with
over
you.
3,000 graduates every June, right?
Oh, yeah, probably. And then you think of how many students leave the system, and so they're digitized, and then they have access. Now, EC is already digitized because we have the Easy IEP process. Same with 504s.
Yep.
And so,
Okay. Well, that's all I have for policies 4-4, 4-5, 4-14, surveys of students. That's a new policy. 4-20, student wellness. 4-24, registered sex offenders. And policy 5-7, health education programs. We are going to send that to the full board. All board members, since we don't have a quorum today, again, all board members will need to do their due diligence on all of these policies because they are up for second review. And next Tuesday, this will require a second in order for these to be approved and to move on. So that brings us to policies for review, for first review. And we'll start with policy 4-3, student discipline, if there's any questions.
I have a couple.
Okay.
So this just recently came up under the Code of Student Conduct, the new language about complying with the Code of Student Conduct number 3 while waiting at any school bus stop. This recently came up, and can we do that?
as long as it's in the time frame that we establish for the bus stop, like we tell you have to be there 5 minutes early or whatever, in that time frame, we can do it for that limited time that we are supposed to be over control of it.
Okay.
For safety circumstances, because we don't want kids to go to the bus stop and not create a safe location. We can't do it, you know, it's not
For hours
yeah,
and
exactly.
the weekend and stuff.
Correct.
Well,
Okay.
then, I mean, would we want to expand that to say while waiting at any school bus during defined stops?
We can do it, you know, during established pickup and drop off times.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Would that help or nah?
I'd leave it broad.
Just leave it
Okay.
broad? Okay.
Personally,
Yeah.
but that's your call.
I mean, we don't go beyond those time frames.
Right.
Mhm.
I just wanted to ask the question
Yep.
if we could do that period, since it's
Yeah.
not school property. It's not a bus. It's not a
Right.
school. It's not a anything, but broader's fine with me.
Okay.
The next page under authority, unless you have anything more on that one, an authority of school personnel. Just in some places, we need that or designee next to the principal.
Sure.
So the principal has the authority to and a responsibility to investigate and take appropriate action regarding any prohibited or criminal student behavior. But if it's criminal, they don't investigate, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So are you comfortable with this language?
Well,
And
yeah, it's got the
says-
including referral to law enforcement. And then when law enforcement's done, they give it back to us and then we have to
Right.
investigate.
That we have to investigate on our own. Okay, so you're good with that.
Yeah.
In the next paragraph, what is a student behavior management plan?
If a student has behavior, you know, has a kind of a chronic misbehavior, then we're required by law to develop a kind of like what you would do for a student who's got a disability behavior intervention plan and develop a behavior contract or something to help establish additional level of, they call it like tier 2 interventions, additional level of interventions with that particular student.
Okay. Is there anything, and maybe we get there when we get to law enforcement, so I'll hold off. Is there, in the law enforcement, is there a requirement for us to for the principal to report to law enforcement anything that they think may be criminal activity? It's not in here, but is it So when we get to the back part, I need to,
Yeah, that's our expectation. The law sets forth certain things that must be reported to law enforcement.
Okay.
There's a list of
okay,
9 or 10 criminal activities
Okay.
that have to be reported. It's our expectation as a district that if it's a crime, we turn it over
okay.
right away.
Why did we delete the Jessica Lunsford Act?
I think we moved it
We moved it, okay,
because now I would not have. we
okay.
didn't-
I just have a couple little.
Yeah.
notes.
Okay.
Okay. That was it that I had.
So that would take us to 4-3C, prohibition of gangs and gang activity.
Well, just an FYI too, because I bring the administrative guidelines that go with policies. This one will have an administrative guideline, an actual code of student conduct that's being worked on right now, and we'll have that for you at the next meeting. And I'm going to be all set there.
Okay.
Any questions on this one? Or-
So this requires in the first paragraph, therefore principals shall work with the site-based management team to develop, are we doing that? They should be,
It
right?
should be. That's a requirement.
Okay.
Yeah.
We need to maybe remind them.
We could do that.
That was, oh no, wait, here. So on page 3 of the, I don't know what, 3, it has the offenses and what will happen to the kids with respect to, with the students with respect to gang and gang activities. What, is it also in the student conduct where we have the discipline procedures? Like, this spells out the violation where the rest of the stuff is in a separate thing that if you do this,
Right.
this is what happens. Does it belong here? Does it belong?
It's in both locations
It is,
because these
okay.
are kind of aggravating factors.
Okay,
So it takes, you get if it's a aggressive action, you get the fight, and then you get the kind of enhanced consequences
Okay.
because of it being.
so it
aggravated.
mimics what's in the,
Yep.
okay, in the disciplinary procedures. Okay.
It does.
So you added a last thing on this that I thought was interesting and maybe applies to more than just this policy. Those policies shall be applied in a non-discriminatory manner. Don't all of our policies are applied in a non-discriminatory?
Yes,
Or
absolutely.
is this more important because of the type of? Okay.
It
Okay.
comes out of case law.
Okay, I'm good with
Okay.
that. Okay. That was it.
Okay.
I just have a couple
Great.
little tiny nits.
So next for review is 4-9, investigation by school personnel.
Okay, first question. School personnel includes SROs or does not include SROs?
Does not technically include SROs. This
So
is
no.
administrators, yeah.
Okay. So this only applies to school administrators and searches.
Mhm.
Okay.
And we used to have an administrative guideline that was searches.
Uh-huh.
And so that didn't seem to make sense to me to have a separate place. So we
Mm-hmm.
folded what was the administrative guidelines. And Jared and I developed those, 2 or 3 years ago?
Mhm.
And so we just inserted it right into this policy as opposed to
Okay.
having it 2 separate places.
Okay. The top of the second page, we're talking about reasonable suspicion. Reasonable suspicion is not required if a student freely, voluntarily, and knowingly consents to the search.
Mhm.
Is there any age requirement for that?
There's actually not,
Okay, cool.
although we tell principals to be aware of the age and maturity of the
Mhm.
student
Okay,
so that you don't have, you could have a 20-year-old with a disability that you don't,
right, okay.
that's not knowing and voluntarily.
Okay, on the page, what says page 2 of 4, but it's really the 4th page.
Yeah, it's
in,
further
right?
back.
Yeah. Under suspicion lists, general searches. Okay, about halfway down, there begins a sentence that says, absent exigent circumstances, for example, a report of a weapon on campus prior to conducting general searches, school administrators must. So if it's a suspicionless general search, why do they have to do all this stuff first?
These are basically our, and it may change depending on how we move forward. but these are metal detector searches.
Okay.
So we need to have a reason to do them if we're going to do the whole school.
So if they do a general search that you define as randomly, is for examples, is a randomly selected classrooms or every
Yeah.
third individual entering, they can do that without permission of the superintendent? Or does every general search need permission first
What
if they're
we
going
have-
to implement it?
Yeah, what we have said in the past is if they feel the need that there's something going on there, they need to run it through Jared as the superintendent's designee.
Okay.
The reason why they need it, what's going on at the school, in part because we know we're going to get the concerns from the parents. It's best to have vetted it out first.
And you have to provide written notice to the students and the parents. So we can't do any suspicionless general searches without letting parents and student know first.
And that's the way we've done it.
Okay.
This is lifted straight from other policy.
Okay.
But we can change that. And it may be that we provide the written notice right through the handbook.
Because if they implement something like every third individual entering a school basketball game because they heard something, that's not suspicionless. So they don't need to go
Correct.
through this
Correct.
thing. Okay.
That's just if they decide they want to just
Do it. Okay. I
Correct.
get it. Okay.
We'll verify that's in our handbooks at the high school, middle
Okay.
school level. I think in most of our handbooks, this is in the handbook.
Okay.
So we don't have to, we normally do a Connect Ed message if we're going to do a metal detection search, maybe a few weeks ahead of time to let parents know that that could happen.
Okay. Perfect. I think that was it. That's it.
You don't have to go back and forth.
Sorry. You can sit here.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to policy 4-10, law enforcement involvement on campus.
Now, this is law enforcement excluding SROs.
Correct.
Okay.
The only thing that applies, I think, to SROs, there is one paragraph, the third one down.
The third one says including SROs.
Yeah, and that's just reminding our principals that they're supposed to do things that aren't criminal behavior, not ask the SRO to investigate tardies.
We might want to move up the definition of SRO and then use it. 'Cause
Sure.
It's, or maybe you don't need it anymore. So B. Okay. Custody or arrest in B
Yeah.
on the second page, the middle paragraph, and all of these situations. So this is if law enforcement's coming in to arrest somebody or take them into custody on campus.
Correct.
In all of these situations, appropriate steps should be taken to ensure minimal embarrassment or loss of class time. Well, if they're getting arrested, there's going to be loss of class time.
Correct. What we're trying to do is have it happen after class, between class breaks. Now, eventually, once they're arrested and removed, they're going to lose class time.
Okay.
But it's trying to
Okay.
remind folks it should happen outside the class. It
Okay.
should happen after class, lunch, those kind of, yeah. Yes, it's not, right in the middle. We don't come and handcuff a kid in the middle of math class and drag them out. Which if it's bad enough, they're going to do that.
Right.
And we're going to walk them down to do it.
Okay.
Jared's got some.
Normally when arrests happen, unless the sheriff or one of the chiefs of police believe the person to be dangerous, they'll notify us. We'll arrange a time when
You'll arrange to get them out of class and into the
that
front
is correct.
office.
So it's
Okay.
the least disruptive to the class. Now, if it's an offense where they feel like the person could run or they're dangerous, they're just going to go in and do it. So
Great.
make
Well,
the arrest.
And I think it says appropriate steps. It doesn't say that in every case.
Correct.
Yes.
So, okay.
But in most circumstances, they work with us to find out the best time to go in.
Okay.
They'll get the SRO, they'll get an administrator, and they'll cause the least disruption they can to our school.
I remember getting a parent complaint or in a community complaint a couple of years ago where an arrest was supposedly being made in between classes. So the student body was in the hallways changing classes when law enforcement apparently was going to arrest a student. Now, that wouldn't be an appropriate time when you know that the student body is not safely inside their classrooms. It seems like that particular situation, may not have been the best timing for law enforcement to be coming through the hallways.
I've not known of any of those circumstances to happen. If it were to happen like that, they would want it to be an immediate arrest where they kind of wanted to surprise the person.
Oh, it was an immediate arrest.
Yes, but in the hallway may not be the best place, but we normally try to make it happen where it's the least disruptive, where it's in a private area, unless they tell us they've got to do it right now.
I think the community members that contacted me, their question was, why wasn't that student just called to the front office or, some administrative guideline like that so that, innocent students weren't in the hallways when all this stuff was happening.
I don't know the specific situation, but I think if they had a concern, they may flee, that they
I think there was.
may not be able to catch them. They may have wanted to do it at some other time, but in the hallway around other students may not be the best time. So if that normally does not happen. That's not a normal circumstance.
It was a couple of years ago. But, from time to time, someone from that community will bring it up to me.
Yes, ma'am.
So, okay, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Administrative guidelines. I guess this is all on probation officers, right?
Correct.
Can we just move it into the policy so it's not?
And absolutely. I was mentioning earlier I'll put a section on probation officers, just put in. We, initially when we did the administrative guidelines, the state gave us about 3 weeks to put it into place. So there wasn't time to do a full policy. So that's why we did the administrative guidelines. And the revisions are based on changes to the MOU that the Department of Justice and the court, Administrative Office of Courts have accepted. So we can just add those together.
I'm good with, I'm good with the changes. I just think it can easily go in
Absolutely.
here because it's all part of law enforcement on campus.
It very well.
So we're saying just take A and not have A, but just put it into 4-10.
I guess I view it, and most of the ones you've ever given us are explanations of how it functions in the school more than a separate category. So this is a category of the policy, not really an explanation. So I viewed it as more as,
absolutely.
But you can tell me I'm wrong.
No, you're right.
So do we want to remove this from administrative guidelines?
We'd like to put it into policy 4-10. It'll become a separate section.
Yeah, I'll have a different section. Okay. I'll collapse the two together.
Okay.
Is that going to create a problem that there's no administrative guideline for?
No, because I don't think the policy says that we have to create an administrative guideline.
Okay.
If it does, we'll remove that as well.
Okay.
I just don't want our administrators to think that we deleted this administrative guideline, that everyone will be.
No, they won't even notice.
That, they won't even notice.
Nope.
Okay, that concerns me even more.
I think that
they'll notice the substance. They won't notice the fact that it was administrative guideline. They don't think the difference between policy and administrative guideline. That's all the rules they have to follow.
Okay.
I don't mind administrative guidelines, but if you're going to look for a policy, it's easier to click on one thing than oh, wait, is there an administrative?
Correct.
And you've done a good job of the AGs are right next to it now, which it didn't used to be, but now they are, so that helps. But if it's all together, and I know some administrative guidelines are really administrative guidelines.
Correct.
How to administer this policy.
Correct.
But that's really a subsection of the policy itself.
Yeah.
I guess I viewed it.
Okay. Very good. So we'll just collapse that into the policy. 4-13, school assignment, administrative guidelines.
And this is another one that and this is up to Michelle, may be something that we place within the policy itself but it may be administrative. I don't know.
My request would be at this point that because we're having some issues that have driven this administrative guideline, that we adopt it as an administrative guideline because of the timing, and then go back and reopen 413 and add it in at some point down the road.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Okay, so here's a question. So this is trying to deal with all of our special programs that are within a school that kids get into, students get into through lottery systems. So it's CATA, it's UCEC, it's the IB program and the IBPP program, the dual language, and Benton Heights. Separate from that is choice schools.
Correct.
So the special program schools, can we define that the special program schools are CATA, UCEC, the International Baccalaureate program, the dual language program, and Benton Heights?
Sure.
Because I think then you can just, you can stop repeating them all.
Sure.
And then the choice schools are kind of a separate thing, right?
Correct.
Okay, and then down on second to last, the penultimate paragraph, parents who wish to enroll their children, I'm sorry, on the first page,
I'm sorry.
to enroll their children in one of these special program schools after the specified admission grade are subject to the following qualifications, but they're also subject to the program's qualifications, right?
Yes. I'll add that.
In addition to the
Yeah.
program, the special program's qualifications. This is just an attempt to explain to parents that you can only get in kindergarten unless you move in dual language, and IB you can only get into in 11th grade. CATA you can only get into in 9th grade. There's certain restrictions on getting in, except if you come from outside the district and you can somehow prove that your program is similar.
Correct.
Okay.
And we have Marvin Ridge, the IB starting at 9th grade now.
9th grade, but it's not required till 11th, right? Or is it required now
I
at
would bet
9th?
there's certain requirements
Yeah,
that they
and-
have to have going in at 9th too.
For the IBPP, that pathway program.
Yes, that's 9th.
Mhm.
That's 9th, and that's only run, and that the paragraph just above it says, it's only run for rising 9th graders. So they only get into the IBPP at 9th grade.
But the IB's at 11th, right?
Correct. And I think right now it's a
It's a,
step into.
okay, yes. But if you have a student who moves here from Georgia and they were in an IB pathway, or even if they weren't, but they qualify for IB, they might be able to get in.
They might be
11th
able to
grade.
get
Okay.
in. Yep.
Okay. Trying to think if there was any other. Explain the last paragraph of the whole thing. Certain programs are at multiple locations. No student will be permitted to transfer from one okay, good. Unless the school to which there is their home school. And there is room at the program in their home school.
An example of that might be, I'm in DLI at Western Union,
Uh-huh.
and I want to go to DLI at Shiloh. And so unless I live in Shiloh's assignment area, I don't get to just switch programs. There's a concern of emptying out programs if I
Right.
decide another
I
program
agree.
is better.
Okay, okay. Then you explain that.
Yeah.
Okay. That was it.
Okay. I apologize for my phone ringing. I have my children on bypass when the ringers turn off. So hopefully everything's okay. Okay, so that wraps up administrative guidelines for review. Action items to send to the board Tuesday night.
Because you don't have a quorum, we'll have no official action items, but based on your recommendation as the chair, we can add these items to the agenda.
Mhm.
I will have the policies for second review will be under policies for approval. And then policies for first review will have a separate for policies for review. And then the administrative guidelines will be under the section of policy /
FYI.
admin guidelines for review.
Okay, that sounds great.
And while doing that though, 4-10 will not be on
Mhm.
there. That will move into 4-10
Great.
policy.
Great.
Perfect.
So only school assignment will be
That
it.
will be the only
And that-
one
Okay.
as administrative guidelines.
Okay.
Okay. Well, that's all we have for today. We will adjourn. And
Awesome.
thank you very much for
Thank you.
being here today and going through all these questions with us.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am.